questions, and we'll get to work for you. That's andrewandtodd.com, andrewandtodd.com.
All right, it is 9:30 and 71 degrees here at the studios of KTUI. And with me this morning, this is kind of going to be her show, is Nancy Harold, and she's from Sacred Fire Farms out in the Bourbon area. And good morning, how are you?
I am fine, how are you?
Good. So we're going to try this out, this is... You're going to give us some information. If people have questions, they're welcome to call.
Absolutely.
And our number here is 468-5101. And if you want to call in and ask Nancy a question, then you're welcome to do so. We'll put you on the air. But Nancy, you actually are an RN,
yes.
Right? And but you're also an herbalist.
Yes.
And but you know the distinction between when you need herbs. You know, if you break your ankle, you're probably not going to rub some herbs on it and make it better,
not.
right? So you know the distinction between when you need a doctor or a doctor's care or the hospital or something like that, and but you also know what herbs can do for you, right?
Absolutely. And I think there's a misperception among many people that, you know, they only have to do what the doctor says. And of course you do if you're treating for a very serious condition. But there's a lot of first aid and interventions that can be done with herbs that really cross over to being foodstuffs. And that's
okay.
one of the things I wanted to talk about today. I did a course at my farm called Emergencies on the Homestead. And I live about 45 minutes away from any healthcare facility. That means, you know, an ambulance would have to come out from a distance, take us back. We're talking possibly more than an hour turnaround time. And in a rural area, there's a lot of farm folk who are just in that same situation. Mm-hmm. It's nice to know what you can have or might have in your spice rack that you can use to your benefit and give a little first aid, at least, you know, better the chances till help comes. So that's part of what I wanted to talk about today.
All right. Well, go ahead. And again, I want to tell people that if you have a question, give us a call, 468-5101. Nancy will try to answer it. And my guess is that if you don't know, you'll try to find out. And when we do this again, then
we'll talk about it.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right.
Yep. And
okay.
I'm good. There's I'm not the final authority on everything, and that's that's something I wanted to also let folks know is that information that I'm giving today is based on my research, my experience, my filters. It's not FDA approved. It's not designed to diagnose, treat, prevent, cure, or mitigate any disease. I have to say that. And it's just some maybe nice to know helpful hints. So one of the first things I wanted to talk about is that when I talk about medicine in your spice rack, this is stuff most of us have. I remember my mom cooking with bay leaves. Mm-hmm. And we always took the bay leaves out because you couldn't eat those. Well, you can make tea from them very safely. And the bay leaf tea has a lot of documented instances of being very helpful for migraines. So that's something, this is stuff that's nice to know as well if you're traveling, because sometimes you don't know where the local urgent care is. It might be the middle of the night, but there might be a convenience store or 7-Eleven or some sort of all-night grocery, Walmart. You could go and pick up these foodstuffs and get some relief till you can get the treatment you need. So bay leaf came on my radar as something that's not only good for migraines, but also inflammation, pain. You can make a strong tea, which we call an infusion. That means it sets for at least 15 minutes in the teacup. And all of these things can be prepared as a tea. A loose leaf tea ball, tea ball that would use loose leaf tea is usually what I brew it in if I need it. Black pepper came up in my research as something that they used back in the day when they had cholera epidemics. And I don't think we have to worry about cholera. But if you're in a foreign country and that's a problem, that might be a handy little factoid to know about. So again, something made as a loose leaf tea. Cardamom is something that sometimes ends up in apple butter or, some specific savory types of dressings. So cardamom, actually, they have recorded instances of people using that to detox the kidneys, and especially can be helpful in moving a kidney stone through. And who knew? Some of this stuff was amazing to me when I did the research. The most impressive thing that I found was cayenne. Numerous anecdotal histories of people using cayenne to thwart the damage from a heart attack. Somebody has chest pain, and that usually happens when there's a blockage in one of the arteries that nourish the heart. So what the cayenne does is actually expand the blood vessels through its warming action, and allows more blood flow to go through, and work on getting more oxygen to the heart, that in turn limits damage. Now, there are some herbs that actually end up as what we call modulators. That means they have kind of different actions for situations. They kind of read what the body needs. So, as paradoxical as it seems, the red cayenne, hot cayenne pepper, has been used as a treatment to pour on wounds that are bleeding excessively, and it halts the bleeding. So in this particular instance, it's reading something in the body and is causing those things to constrict. It's not uncommon to find, herbs that and foodstuffs that do that, simply because I believe, it's my personal opinion, there's a divine intelligence at work that I don't completely understand, but I've seen it several times.
So how do you take the cayenne? I mean, I don't, put it on with some butter on some bread or what, what.
Actually, for that, what I would...
I love black pepper. You were talking
Uh-huh.
about that. I put pepper on all kinds of stuff, but cayenne, how would you administer it?
Well, you can get it as a fine powder
Okay.
and put it in a quarter cup of water, stir it around. It's not going to be great. But they also make a lot of cayenne, commercially prepared cayenne extracts. And we make our own at the farm, but I actually encourage people to purchase an extract. If you have somebody in your house who's at risk for heart disease or over 50, just as a good general practice, having it in your first aid kit, buy a commercial extract. And that's usually a little milder because they've taken the cayenne out. They've extracted its properties, but you don't have the real warmth. I'm really sensitive to hot pepper, and it kind of makes me make an ugly face if I get too much of it. And there's usually a few bad words associated with it at the same time. But I tolerate an extract really well. So
Okay.
that's an option to have that on hand.
Okay.
Cinnamon. Cinnamon's a fun thing to play with. Yeah, because we're used to having it on our rolls, in these warm sticky buns and those, delicious treats and desserts. But Ceylon cinnamon, which is a true cinnamon, there's a lot of cinnamon imitations, so you want to do some label checks here. Ceylon cinnamon actually is known for reducing blood sugar. So if somebody's having a blood sugar spike while they're on a trip, maybe ate a little food they shouldn't have eaten, the Ceylon cinnamon can actually be a benefit to them.
So how much of that do you have to take?
If people can monitor their blood sugar, if they already have the machine to do that, and they're probably doing it anyway, then I would look at, again, doing a very small amount in some water, take a sip, see how you feel, recheck your blood sugar, and adjust the dose by whatever readings you're getting. Would be my thought. Clove. I don't know if you ever had a toothache when you were growing up and did that clove oil.
No, I haven't.
Okay.
I mean, I don't have toothaches very often. I mean, just a handful of times in my entire life. So no, I haven't.
It was much common, I think, when I was, a kid. We had toothache, you put oil of clove on it, it had a numbing effect, so it's well known as an analgesic. However, it's also a remedy for intestinal parasites. Again, this might be something we deal with when we're traveling more than, at home, but it's still nice to know that if the grid goes down and you think you got a hold of something you shouldn't have, that you have a means to address both the pain and maybe the intestinal cramping from
So
that.
in this instance, I mean, would you buy it, or would you take a clove and crush it and?
I think whatever is handy for you and most comfortable for you to do with what you have on hand, because it's going to be easier for somebody maybe to crush a clove than someone who has arthritis, and so you take the powdered clove and maybe put it in a little warm water and sip on that.
Okay.
I found this one kind of interesting. I did not know this until I started doing a deep dive on what we have in our spice rack. But dill, our common garden dill, is actually an antioxidant, and you can use the seeds or the leaf for bad breath. So if you got a hot day and you're out of mouthwash,
Go for the dill.
go for the dill. Fennel seed. I have a funny story to talk about this one. So fennel seed was an old-time remedy for colicky babies. If you had, when colic is just those gas, those hard cramps. So if you had a colicky baby, the frontier people would take their fennel seed and they, steep that in warm water and make a tea of it. I had a friend who have a friend who has diverticulitis, and so these are regular bouts that occur, and she normally has meds on hand to limit the attack. But she called me one night and she says, I know these meds will work, but I am so miserable. Is there anything you can think of to take in the meantime that might work a little faster? And I said, well, you can try the fennel seed for, the old-time folk remedy for gas and bloating. And I'll check on you in the morning to see how you're doing. And she's a gourmet cook, so she has every seed imaginable.
Oh, yeah.
And so I checked on her and I said, so how you feeling this morning? And she said, I love you.
Oh.
She says it was almost instant relief 5 minutes later.
So it's funny to me because I've had relatives, my grandmother, and had diverticulitis or ticulosis or something like, and they tell you don't eat anything with seeds.
Right.
But here you're telling me to fix it with a seed, right?
Well, we're doing a tea with a seed.
Okay.
So you're steeping the
Okay. So you're not
fennel
actually
seed.
taking the seed.
No,
right?
not
Okay.
taking
All
the
right.
seeds. But it's usually pretty effective for people. And I still marvel at the fact that, these things many times work faster than the stuff we're giving for relief. But it doesn't preclude or, it's not intended to be used as a substitute for anything. Like I said, this person had started on an appropriate regime, but she just wanted a little relief. And my philosophy is anything that we can eat in some form or use as a foodstuff in some form is safe to make as a tea, because tea or water extraction passes through the body relatively quickly. Unlike maybe an alcohol extraction where they pull the active ingredient from, in an alcohol extraction setting, or even distillation with, essential oils. So fennel seed is good for that gas and pain. Garlic. Most of us have garlic. Now here's another, you were talking about putting it on bread and toast. I actually have to do that because of my sensitivity to the heat.
Oh.
And I wasn't sure how well it would work, but I was getting a cold, and garlic and I didn't want to go over to the shop where I keep all my extracts. So I actually had dried minced garlic. It's probably a 3-year-old packet because I like to use fresh. I don't use the dry unless I just absolutely have to. And I didn't have any fresh garlic. I was pretty sleepy. So I took that minced garlic and I mixed it up in butter and I put it on a cracker so it would be better tolerated. And it actually had the effect of clearing the sinuses and avoiding what I thought was going to be a sinusitis. And the next morning, it seemed like really there was no further action needed. So that was pretty surprising.
So a lot of, I was trying to remember what they tell you to take garlic for things. What is it? Is it garlic? I think it's garlic or something. Is one of the medicines they try to say. So what does garlic do for you?
Garlic is an antimicrobial. And when we use the term antimicrobial, that generally means it works against bacteria, fungus, and virus. It covers, think of it as a broad spectrum element that'll work on infection. I have a friend who tells a story. He loves garlic, and he can do this because he can tolerate the heat, and he actually puts a clove of garlic in his mouth to chew on when he feels like he's getting a cold. Swears by it. And so it's also an antioxidant, takes down a lot of the inflammation. So very potent remedy, even so much so that they tell people who are battling some autoimmune issues where your immunity is going to increase that they may want to stay away from garlic. Now, the school of thought's still out on that. But most things as a foodstuff I feel are relatively safe. You have to follow, though, your own body's messages.
Well, I was going to ask you, can you overdose on cinnamon or whatever, some of these things? Can you take too much?
I would think that you really wouldn't want to. I mean, the taste would kind of be mitigating because if you're just eating pure cinnamon, tea, it'd be really strong. Yeah. But as a food stuff, I get real liberal. I don't worry about how many garlic flakes or, minced dried garlic I have or eat. I just kind of eat till I feel like I'm full or I've had enough garlic.
And then what was it for bad breath? What was that?
Dill.
Dill, yeah.
Yeah.
Then you follow that with dill, so you're not breathing on people. Is that?
Yeah, right, exactly. You can follow up with some dill.
Yeah.
Ginger has a long-standing history for use for morning sickness, but in modern times they pretty much play it safe and don't and recommend that people who are pregnant check with their physician. The physician may or may not know. He may tell you to avoid anything that he doesn't prescribe altogether, and I suggest you follow his advice. It does, however, help with nausea in general. So people who have, I know I had a round of inner ear problems that just really rocked my world. The horizon actually went vertical, and I had a pretty upset stomach with that. So ginger would have been a benefit had I known about it then. Most likely, I wouldn't have hesitated to use some. Oregano comes up high on the scale of this, and another antimicrobial. There's a school of thought that the Mediterranean or Greek oregano is more potent, especially against fungus, than our garden variety oregano. But I use both. I grow both, and I put the garden variety oregano in with the chickens as an antimicrobial, help keep them fresh chicks hatch. I just make a tea with it and use that as a substitute for their water, and it's a good way to organically dose chickens. You can take the oregano and make your own oregano oil. That is not the same as oil of oregano. I think there's a misperception there. Oil of oregano is distilled from there, and it's very concentrated, and you never want to take that raw. It's very corrosive actually taken raw, unless you put it in a carrier oil, and I don't really do much with distilled oils because frankly I have enough to remember just doing the herbs. But I do teach in my class how to make oregano oil, which I feel is safer and does a lot of the same thing, and it's really just a simple process of taking oregano leaves, putting it in an olive oil, and letting it simmer. A little bit of heat tends to be more of an extractant. So I'll do it on a low simmer, maybe about an hour, and just let it get really rich and dark. You can put it in a mini crock pot, make it that way, have it on hand, and just use it as you need to if you feel cold coming on. Peppermint. Anything in the mint family usually has an ability to settle the stomach, so that's another alternative if the ginger is just too much to do. Peppermint's usually well tolerated. And again, there's so much that we can tolerate in high form, but usually that's the thing, you don't tend to need a lot to do a lot of this, get the corrective benefits or the first aid benefits. So rosemary. Rosemary has a rich herbal tradition. There was an herbalist in the 1600s, Culpeper. He was kind of the first one who started documenting outcomes from using herbs, and he loved rosemary. Rosemary has been credited with being a mood elevator, a memory booster, so anything with cognition. I like it as So I have a formula I created for myself because snakes being what they are and pretty prevalent in my neck of the woods. I'm told we're in copperhead season. Rosemary has an element in it that tends to neutralize the venom of our current local snakes, which have a hemolytic toxin, meaning they cause bleeding. So when the snake bites someone, it's actually kind of creating its own fast food. That poison breaks down tissue. That's where we get our pain. And as an emergency room nurse, I can tell you that, former emergency room nurse, that they really try not to give the antidote, the snake bite remedy, if they don't have to, because it can cause some,
what do they call it, an antitoxin
right.
or something? Yeah.
It can cause some side effects. So at least in my day, the treatment was to give you lots of fluids, watch you, give it if needed, but not the first thing out of the gate. You'll have to signal me on time because I.
Oh yeah, we're fine. We got about 10 minutes.
Okay,
yeah, well, you're good.
I can talk that longer or more probably.
Well, we want to save some for the next go around.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we can do that. I'm perfectly willing to take calls. There's a number of things that we can do, I feel, to even outside the food category that are out of this mention of the spice rack, but still in the food category that are nice for safety. So, yeah, this is my passion. This is what I like to study. I probably spend time researching between an hour and two every day and looking for natural remedies. And I also compare it with what's out there as far as current research being done, because there is actually research being done on what were old-time folk remedies and what has real value to it. So, there are publications, and a lot of these are inconclusive, of course, because nobody's usually going to spend time to invest money in these studies or prove them if pharmaceuticals are still so profitable. But they are giving some nods to, in fact, that's where I found out about rosemary being a topical, possibly beneficial for neutralizing the venom in snake bite. So I do actually a mix of slippery elm, which is a drawing herb, slippery elm bark, crushed rosemary, and activated charcoal. Those tends, the first, slippery elm and the activated charcoal, tend to be drawing and neutralizing. But what I found out through more than one report, between the rosmarinic acid that's in rosemary and a combination with something that's called I always trip over this, hyaluronic enzyme inhibitor, because that venom contains the enzyme. So this inhibits the snakebite venom, basically kind of slows that whole pre-digestion fast food. And I hope I never have to use it. I just combined the three things I thought would be most effective for a snake bite. Still, put ice on it and go to the hospital, but in that, 50 minutes time, I might be able to limit some tissue damage.
Okay.
So it's also kind of nice to know for camping. You may be way, way out and far away from a hospital. So again, these aren't things to be used to the exclusion of everything else, but they might buy you some time. Saffron. Saffron has gotten some rave reviews for anxiety and depression, and it's, again, little bits, small bits, they make pre-prepared. And if you're ever concerned about the amounts, almost everything that I'm mentioning here also comes commercially prepared as an extract. So if you want just a natural healing medicine chest, pull out all these things. You can shop on Amazon, load up your, yeah. I've had people, I want to put a medicine chest together that just has natural things. But again, it's designed for first aid. Sage, our common garden sage, is an old-time remedy for diarrhea, believe it or not. So you can crush some sage and make a tea with that and get some relief. This is another one that amuses me. So every now and then I'll get a wild hair, and it's like, where does this drug come from? Do they manufacture it in a lab, or do they, have to extract it from a botanical? And I got a wild notion to research Tamiflu, that's given
Sure.
for flu symptoms.
Right.
Like, where does it come from? Well, it is extracted from a botanical. I can't find anything that says it's currently manufactured in a lab. I usually check every year just in case they found a way. This was, the botanical they extracted from is Chinese star anise. Or if you're used to saying Chinese star anise, it's one of the seasoning spices that we put in apple butter.
Oh.
It's commonly contained in apple butter. And so when I was looking at what is being extracted, it's a chemical called shikimic acid. So Chinese star anise has 7%, only 7% of this shikimic acid. I'm sure they concentrate it. Like any other botanical, it has good and bad growing seasons. So when they come up short on Chinese star anise, the next most common botanical they'll draw from are green sweet gum balls. Who knew?
I have a whole yard full of them at times during the.
Yeah, but they have to be green.
Well,
once they're brown, they're not good.
You can have all the green ones you want. And then they don't turn into brown ones.
Yeah, exactly. And you step on them, and not a good thing. But so the shikimic acid in the green sweet gum balls comes to around 3%. They're finding the ginkgo leaf also has that amount. I don't know they extract from that commercially, but they're considering it. The funny thing is that he came home. This was pre-COVID. I say he, like, it's my
sure.
husband, who's just joining me in the booth today. Silent Mike, not Silent Bob, Silent Mike. He had come home. This was pre-COVID, so it was pretty easy to identify. He had the flu. He was gray. He was sweaty. His eyes were droopy, and he says, "I don't feel good." And I said, "Oh, darling, we need to get you dosed and get you to bed." But since it's so late, there were no urgent care places open. I wasn't going to occupy an ER, waiting room and submit everybody else to flu. And they didn't feel that good. And it's, like I said, 45 minutes away from any healthcare facility. So I had just come across star anise as a treatment, and I had some in the cabinet. We ground it up, and I made a tea, and within an hour, his fever broke.
Oh.
And the next morning, he got up and was symptom-free.
All right. Okay, so we've got about 4 minutes left. Do you want to talk about some of your classes and
Yes.
things that you do? How do people find out about them and get registered and things like that?
Absolutely. We have a Facebook page under Sacred Fire Farms Herbal Education Center, and we have a website, which is sacredfireliving.com. And that has our calendar list of events. We primarily teach herbal classes. We're in the midst of one right now. Our season is ending to do the plant walk, so what I'm going to do is offer 2 weeks in September if there's an interest. I need at least 2 people to sign up for a 1-week intensive. That means they come 5 days in a row. Our flagship course, which is the Elementary Herbalist, that teaches people how to use the herbal skills of their grandparents, what I had to work really hard to find out, we offer as a 5-week course, so you'll come 1 day a week.
I probably could have learned all of this if I would have paid more attention to my great-grandmother.
Yeah, all of us could have. I asked my mom, I said, "Why don't you know this stuff?" And she says, "Honey, we always thought there'd be an old-timer around who knew it."
Yeah.
And those folks, unfortunately, aren't around anymore. So, yeah, our next event, we are part of the Washington County Farm Tour. People can come visit the farm between 10 and 4, is it? 10 and 5. My husband just corrected me. He's my calendar keeper. On August 26th. And you're going to get a tour and see the remedy garden and learn more about classes that we offer. And we, if you check on our website, we post what's available for people to learn from monthly.
All right. So are there things people can do for some common things like maybe sunburn or something?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What can you do for that?
I really like comfrey has become kind of controversial, but comfrey leaves I make into a salve, and that is a great thing for sunburn. Calendula is another common plant used for skin irritation. Cool compresses. Vinegar was working for some people, the white vinegar as an old-time remedy, and most of that's in some households.
Is there an herb that you can take to make mosquitoes not like you?
Actually, it's it's said that people can cut down on bites if they eat plantain buds, the little seed pods. Yeah, and that's supposed to work to repel ticks as well, which I've actually had good luck when I've gone in the woods. I've taken the time to eat it.
So there's a lot of people that are getting bit by the Lone Star tick or something?
Yes.
Alpha-gal syndrome stuff.
Yes.
I mean, so anything you can do to keep ticks away from you.
Absolutely. Garlic
Garlic?
is said to change the blood chemistry enough, if you can tolerate that.
I like garlic.
Yeah. I can do it in small doses. I just can't get too wild and crazy with it.
Yeah. I don't think you can overdose on garlic. My wife thinks I probably do. But
Just do a little dill after,
a
You'll
little
be,
dill.
Little
There you
dill.
go.
You'll be
All right.
great.
All right. We got about a minute. What do you want to tell people?
I would say again, just repeat our website, which is sacredfireliving.com. You can ask a question there. We also do our space. We actually recreated a historic barn and rebuilt that. So it's 115 years old, and you can rent it out for family reunions, weddings, whatever event you want to do, anniversary celebrations, and we have that information.
And it's actually a century farm.
Yeah.
And you're what generation living?
Fifth generation.
Fifth generation living
Yeah.
on it. So that's pretty amazing.
A lot of tradition and history.
All right. So Nancy, we're going to do this again next month.
Yes, I hope so.
Okay. and which is, what is today, the second Tuesday? What are we doing? Yeah, second Tuesday. We're going to try to do this again second Tuesday of next month then. All right. Well, I appreciate you coming in and talking, and we look forward to talking to you next month then.
I appreciate the opportunity.
All right. We are AM 1560 KTUI Sullivan, 94.1 FM. It's 10 o'clock.
USA News, I'm Corey Myers. Former President Trump's legal